Hey guys, tonight we slip quietly into a stone monastery perched on the wind-chilled highlands of 14th century Ethiopia. The sky outside is still a velvet pre-dawn blue, and the birds haven't yet remembered to wake up. You stir on a straw mat that smells faintly of goat and last week's incense. Your back is stiff because medieval monks didn't get orthopedic anything, and the blanket tangled around your ankles is roughly as warm as a wet napkin. This is your life now. You're a monk, a humble servant of God, knowledge, and whatever root vegetables didn't get eaten by hyenas last night. The air is cool and damp as you sit upright, brushing dried barley crumbs from your robe. Your cell gust, a carved nook in a stone wall, really is lit by the faintest sliver of candlelight leaking in from the hallway. You hear the soft shuffling of sandals outside. Someone's already up and walking to chapel, which means you're probably behind. Again. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe it, only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, leave a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time it is. Over there I love hearing from night owls around the world. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You swing your legs down, touching bare feet to the cold stone floor. It's the kind of chill that bypasses your skin and just enters your bones directly. Like no polite knocking. You sigh and reach for your robe, which smelled not bad, but very much like it was last washed, sometime before the Black Death reached Cairo. Sliding into it anyway, you shuffle out of your cell. The hallway is narrow and dim, carved right out of the mountains centuries ago. The stones sweat during rainy seasons, and the monks like to joke very quietly that the building itself prays harder than they do. Outside, the highland air hits you like a slap from a cold, damp pillow. A rooster crows somewhere in the distance, although frankly it sounds like it's been possessed by a spirit that didn't practice. You glance toward the sky and see a few stars still clinging on, reluctant to leave. Sunrise here isn't dramatic, it just sort of leaks in, slowly turning the world from navy blue to dusty gold. You begin the first real step in your day, walking up the steep slope to the chapel. It's a modest stone structure with a domed roof and a door that creaks like it's auditioning for a horror film. Inside, a dozen candles flicker against the walls, and Brother Johannes is already kneeling, muttering prayers through a beard that could house at least 3 birds. The chapel smells like old beeswax, dried herbs, and something smoky, probably last night's incense. You'll find your spot on the cool floor and kneel, tucking your robe under your knees for a bit of warmth. The first chant of the day begins. It's in Ge'ez, the ancient liturgical language, which you can read but only kind of understand, sort of like Latin for modern choir boys, or IKEA instructions for everyone else. The chant is slow, meditative. You hum along, voice joining the others in a low, echoing drone that vibrates through the stone walls. Brother Meleku sneezes 3 times he always does. You're starting to think it's a reflex triggered by candles. No one acknowledges it, because silence is still in effect. Silence lasts until breakfast or until Brother Kadain drops something. Which, to be fair, is often outside. The sun's creeping over the mountains now, casting long shadows across the monastery courtyard. One donkey is braying like it's seen the face of the Lord and is deeply unimpressed. You glance at the altar. Its simple wooden cross and the thin cloth draped across it. There are no stained glass windows here, just tiny carved holes that let in the light in sharp surgical beams. You watch the dust mote swirling in one of those beams, caught in some celestial slough dance. There's peace here, quiet, cold, and deeply uncomfortable peace. Now, one real historical fact you might like while you kneel there fighting off a sneeze of your own. Ethiopian Orthodox monasteries during the 14th century were key centers for both religious and intellectual life. While Europe wrestled with war, plague, and unfortunate fashion choices, Ethiopian monks were preserving ancient texts, developing unique theological traditions, and, believe it or not, experimenting with musical notation that looked like squiggles drunk on holy water. A fringe tidbit. Some monks, especially the hermit types, were believed to survive on nothing but wild honey, spring water, and divine grace. Though divine grace, to be honest, is terrible for your protein intake. And as for scholarly debate, historians still argue whether these monasteries were mostly isolated, spiritual sanctuaries, or subtly political centers of royal influence. Either way, You're here now, and your only influence is whether or not you accidentally blow out the candle in front of you with your morning breath. As the chanting fades, you bow, press your forehead to the ground, and then rise slowly. Your knees crack in protest, loudly enough that Brother Tisfay turns to squint at you. You bow again, respectfully apologetic, though you're 99% sure he's still mad about that time you took the last roasted beetroot at dinner 3 weeks ago. The first prayer session is over, but the day is only just beginning. Outside, the sun has turned the stony path golden. The sky is massive and cloudless, the kind of blue that looks printed. A breeze tugs gently at your robe, and you squint toward the eastern mountains, where mist still curls between the ridges, like leftover dreams. You head toward the communal basin for your ritual wash. The water's collected in a cracked ceramic jar that sits permanently in shadow, so it's about 2 degrees warmer than actual ice. You dip your hands in and splash your face. You regret it instantly. Congratulations. You're awake now. You're dripping. Your face is now both clean and slightly numb. Welcome to the next stage of monkhood, the part where you pretend cold water is invigorating and not, in fact, a medieval torture method. You dry your face on your sleeve because towels are for people with sinful attachments to luxury, and besides, your robe's already damp from deep candle smoke and last night's mysterious spill near the refectory. You glance at the line forming behind you with the Basante and other monks, equally cold, equally grumpy, equally pretending that this is all very spiritually meaningful. Once your ablutions are done, you're allowed to break your silence, but only in the softest of murmurs. This is not the time for jokes, complaints, or reenacting last night's dream where you and St. Yerd rode flying donkeys over Lake Tana. No, this is the time to nod solemnly at Brother Macias and say things like, "The Lord is good," or "That rooster sounds worse every day." Breakfast, fortunately, is just around the corner, and by corner, you mean a 10-minute uphill walk to the refectory, which is basically a long, narrow room with wooden benches, a large crucifix on the wall, and zero insulation. You shuffle up with the rest of the brothers, the rhythmic clop of sandals on stone echoing like a sleepy drumbeat. The scent hits you before the door opens. Not bacon. Definitely not bacon. No eggs either. You wish. No. This is the smell of barley flatbread, again, and boiled nettles, again, and possibly some chickpeas. You can't tell. Everything's been boiled into an unidentifiable, grayish paste. You sit down at the bench. A chunk of bread is placed in front of you, dense round, and the exact consistency of a fossilized sandal. You tear off a piece and chew slowly, very slowly, because rushing through it increases the risk of breaking a molar, and monastic dentistry is just offer it up to God and try not to scream. Still, there's a kind of comfort here. You're surrounded by silence again, except for the clink of bowls and the occasional cough. The morning sun filters in through narrow slits in the wall, striping the table with light. You take a sip of water from a clay cup and glance across at Brother Samuel, who's already halfway through his bread and somehow manages to chew it like it's not a medieval building material. You suspect witchcraft. Now is a good time to mention that Ethiopian monastic meals followed a deeply spiritual rhythm. The 14th century Ethiopian Orthodox Church had strict fasting days, sometimes over 200 of them a year. During fasts, no meat or dairy is allowed, which explains the aggressively lentil-forward menu. Today isn't a fast day though, so you're allowed a pat of goat cheese, which the monks treat with the reverence of a rare gemstone. As you munch your crumbly blessing, let's slide into today's official fact. The Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church maintains one of the oldest continuous Christian traditions in the world, with roots tracing back to the 4th century CE. Monastic life in Ethiopia often meant living remotely, sometimes perched on cliffside caves or deep in the Simene Mountains, wrapped in fog and silence. But here's a strange little fringe tidbit for you. Some early monks believed that eating garlic made angels avoid you, since the smell was too earthly, which might explain why you haven't seen Brother Hale in the chapel. Lately he's been sneaking wild garlic into his lentil soup again, and wouldn't you know it, historians still argue whether the harshness of monastic diets was meant as pure spiritual discipline, or if it was also a practical reaction to regional food scarcity. You like to believe it's a bit of both, but mostly, you believe it's hard to be spiritually elevated when your jaw is locked from overchewing barley. After breakfast, There's a brief moment where the abbot offers a short blessing. You all bow your heads as he recites a psalm, his voice echoing in the sparse hall. A couple of monks are clearly on the edge of nodding off again. You're not judging, you're jealous. Then comes the sound you dread every morning, a small brass bell ringing outside. The task bell, as you've dubbed it. Time for job assignments. You file out of the refectory and into the courtyard. The sun has fully risen now, flooding the highland plateau with gold. A herd of goats bleats lazily somewhere near the herb garden. You spot one monk half-heartedly shooing a chicken away from the chapel steps, with a broom that has maybe 3 bristles left. The abbot stands by the old olive tree in the center of the courtyard, holding a wooden tablet. Not the electronic kind, obviously. This is a flat slab of olive wood, stained dark with age, and inscribed with names in Giez. Your name is there. You know it's there. The question is, where? He begins reading assignments aloud in a slow, deliberate tone. Brother Elias is off to tend the gardens. Brother Gahanpour Solis sent to scrub the latrine pits again. You make the sign of the cross for him. The smell doesn't wash off, ever. And then, your name. Scribe duty. You exhale. Could be worse. Scribe duty means a full day in the scriptorium copying manuscripts, illuminating pages, and getting yelled at if you smudge the ink with your elbow again. You nod, bow slightly to the abbot, and head toward the tower library. On your way, you pass Brother Gaetan, hauling a mop and muttering, "Why is it always me?" You pat him on the back in solidarity, careful not to inhale too deeply. Before you reach the scriptorium, a final part of your morning routine awaits. The bell tolls again, and you all pause, the daily moment of reflection, standing still under the rising sun, arms at your sides. You're supposed to meditate on humility and discipline. Your thoughts drift. The wind is picking up. You smell the faint smoke of someone boiling tea leaves nearby. A hawk circles overhead, scanning the cliffs. You sigh, half focused on divine mysteries, half distracted by the fact that your left sandal is starting to come apart. Again, your stomach makes a noise, not hunger, just confusion. The scriptorium is dim, quiet, and smells like a mixture of old ink, melted candle stubs, and the general ambience of monks trying very hard not to fall asleep sitting upright. You shuffle in and take your usual seat near the eastern window, where the light is good for a few hours before the sun swings around and decides to blind you instead. Your desk is a simple wooden plank atop 2 uneven stones. It wobbles slightly, because of course it does. On it lies your current project, a fresh piece of parchment made from scraped goatskin, faintly yellowed and still bearing a bit of a barnyard personality. The ink pot beside it is a thick ceramic jar with a crusty black rim. You poke it with your reed pen, still wet. Good. Today's task, copying the Psalms of David in Giez script. You've done this before. A lot. The Psalms have started taking on strange meanings in your head, and you're 80% sure one of them, when misread sleepily, sounds like it's just David begging for a sandwich. You dip your pen, steady your hand, and begin within the heavens. The letters flow like thick smoke from your pen tip. Giez script has a grace to its sharp lines balanced with soft curls. You lose yourself in the rhythm. Dip, scratch, breathe. Dip, scratch, breathe. Brother Fakadu beside you is doing the same, though occasionally letting out a noise that's half sigh. He stayed up for midnight vigil last night and didn't recover. The trick to scribe work isn't just the handwriting, it's surviving the distractions. A fly lands on your nose. You don't move. Another lands in the ink. You sigh and flick it out, hoping its tiny corpse doesn't turn the next line into a eulogy. Still, there's a kind of peace to this. The quiet murmur of pens, the flicker of candles, the creak of wood. Outside, birds chirp lazily. A goat bleats once, mournfully, possibly in solidarity. One fun fact to liven up this moment: Ethiopian monasteries in the 14th century were home to some of the world's most beautifully illuminated manuscript jewel-toned icons of saints and angels, painted using pigments made from crushed minerals and, wait for it, burnt donkey hooves. You can't make that up. Well, technically, someone did, but it was a monk, so it's probably fine. You're not painting today, though. Today's all ink, which brings you to your quirky tidbit of the day. The ink is made from soot, tree gum, and a touch of goat gall. No, not gall like courage, actual gall, like from the gallbladder. It helps the ink stick, supposedly. You've tried not to think too hard about it since you spilled a little on your sleeve last week and smelled like angered livestock for 3 days. There's an occasional chant that ripples through the hall from a monk trying to keep focus. You hum along under your breath of ki, probably, but no one notices, or they'd pretend not to, which is very monastic of them. Your progress is steady, line by line. You fill the page, you get to a verse about humility, and remember that time Brother Dawit tripped during Mass and bowed so low he nearly kissed the floor. Humble, indeed. As the morning creeps forward, the sun angle shifts. That nice golden light now beams directly into your eye. You lean slightly to the side, hoping to block it with your own head. It doesn't help. You squint, give up, and reposition the parchment. Your hand starts to cramp around the pen. You stretch it out, flex your fingers, crack a knuckle. You glance over at Brother Fakadu's page. He's drawn a tiny, smug-looking lion in the corner of his margins. He notices you noticing and shrugs. King of Judah, he whispers, symbolism. You nod sagely. You both know he's just bored. Now, here's something the scholars still bicker about, whether these monasteries functioned more like strict theological boot camps or laid-back intellectual hubs where monks could explore ideas freely. Some texts suggest the abbot's rule was absolute, others hint at lively, even heretical, debates being tolerated so long as nobody spilled the ink. Your current scroll is nearly half full. One of the tricky bits about copying scripture is making 0 mistakes. There's no whiteout in the 14th century. If you mess up badly enough, you start over, from scratch, which is why, to this day, monks have nightmares about accidentally writing "thou shalt murder" instead of "not." You double-check your latest line. Looks fine. You exhale. There's a sudden noise breather. Tisfai's chair collapses. Just like that. Wood gives out with a crunch, and down he goes in slow motion, robes flying up, arms flailing. He lands with a sound that's part grunt, part prayer. Everyone freezes. The abbot, seated near the back, doesn't even look up. "Fix it," he murmurs, then continues writing. Tisfai groans and gives a weak thumbs up from the floor. You return to your work, suppressing a smile. This is the most excitement you've had since someone added coriander to the lentils last month. The hours stretch long. You blink, and suddenly half the day's vanished, swallowed by ink and goatskin and that weird buzzing noise in your ear that might just be sleep deprivation. Eventually, the bell rings for midday meal. You set your pen down, roll your neck, and gently blow on the page to dry the last few lines. It looks good, or as proud as one can be in a place where pride is considered a sin, and good handwriting is your only currency. You rise, legs stiff, robe slightly stuck to the bench from accumulated candle wax seat. You'll be back here tomorrow, and the next day, and probably for the next decade or two, unless someone miraculously decides you'd make a good traveling preacher. Unlikely. As you walk out into the light, blinking against the glare, a thought creeps in. You forgot to write the verse number on the last line. You try not to think about the missing verse. Really, you do, but as you walk toward the refectory for lunch, that little omission gnaws at you. What if someone thinks it was intentional? What if a future monk spends 3 days hunting for verse 17 and assumes it was lost in a fire or eaten by goats? What if the abbot notices and decides your pen privileges should be revoked? Again you sigh. Too late to fix it now. The ink's already dry, and lunch waits for no monk. The midday sun blazes overhead as you enter the communal hall once more. The smell of something vaguely edible floating in from the kitchens. The refectory is warmer than it was this morning. Sunlight pours through the slit windows in thin, dramatic beams, lighting up the floating dust as if the air itself is trying to look holy. You take your usual spot on the bench, just beneath the creaky ceiling beam that groans every time someone breathes near it. A wooden bowl is placed in front of you. You look down. Ah, lentils. Again, you poke at the stew with a spoon carved from a tree branch, possibly by someone blindfolded. It's thick, brownish green, and steaming. You think you see a chickpea. Then again, it might be a pebble. You dip your chunk of barley bread into the mix. It absorbs the lentils like a sponge, and now you have hot, soggy roofing tile for lunch. Across the table, Brother Zudu is already halfway through his bowl, chewing with the intensity of someone trying to pretend this is a religious experience. You try to match his pace but hit a chewy bit that could double as monastic armor. You chew. You chew some more. You stare longingly at the wall as if it might contain escape. Around you, The monks eat in silence, a spiritual discipline that makes every cough, sniff, and stomach gurgle feel like a cannon blast. No one speaks, but the eye contact says everything. You're not alone in your suffering. It's time for today's real historical fact. Fasting and austere eating were central to Ethiopian monastic life, especially in the 14th century. Meals were eaten in silence, often communally, with monks sitting on low benches and eating with simple wooden utensils. The diet was largely vegetarian by religious law and practical necessity, featuring lentils, grains, roots, and the occasional luxury, honey or cheese. But here's your quirky fringe detail. Some monks believed that chewing too quickly led to unspiritual digestion, meaning the holier you wanted to be, the longer it took you to finish lunch. In short, speed eating was for heretics. Across from you, Brother Dawit makes a face and gently nudges his bowl aside. He's reached his theological threshold for lentils. You do the same. Once lunch is finished, the bowls are gathered by the Novasiga young monks in training, who still think the monastery is a place of mystical wonder. You watch one of them nearly drop the entire stack of bowls. He recovers, bows dramatically, and scurries out. Now, it's time for what the schedule generously calls free time. You don't laugh out loud. That would break the silence. But you think it's free time? That's adorable. You step outside into the courtyard, the high sun baking the stone beneath your sandals. A couple of monks have already headed to the shade to meditate. One is clearly asleep, his head drooping like a tulip in late autumn. You respect the hustle. You, however, have decided to use your free time wisely. You'll return to your cell, maybe mend that hole in your robe, maybe write out a few lines of verse to practice your penmanship. You walk slowly, past the herb garden, where something vaguely minty wafts up through the dry air. On your way, you pass Brother Abraham, who gives you a subtle nod and points toward a low bench. It's the quiet we need to talk. Nod. You change course. Abraham is the monastery's unofficial herbalist, spiritual advisor, an emergency His beard is legendary. He gestures for you to sit, then leans in, whispering, "There's something growing behind the latrines. I think it's fennel, or a minor demon. You should look at it later." You nod solemnly. "I will pray on it." He pats your shoulder, satisfied. Now, here's a point scholars still like to wrangle over. Just how strictly did monks follow the free time equals prayer doctrine? Some accounts suggest monks regularly used these windows for rest or contemplation. Others hint they sometimes used the time to engage with villagers, tend gardens, or on rare occasions carve saints out of tree bark while humming very unapproved songs. You decide to do something deeply spiritual. Lie flat on your back in the shade for 10 minutes and stare at a cloud shaped like a camel. It's moving very slowly. So are you. And that's okay. Eventually, you make your way to the chapel for a quick personal prayer. You step into the cool darkness, the scent of beeswax and burnt frankincense wrapping around you like a sleepy fog. You kneel, bow your head, and whisper a psalm under your breath, one of the shorter ones. A few rows over, Brother Tisfe is muttering too, possibly confessing to stealing extra goat cheese again. You sit for a while in the quiet. The candle nearest you flickers, and then you think about the missing verse number again. You think about dinner. Time moves strangely here. It bends and folds, like old parchment in the sun. Hours slide into each other without edge. You've been in prayer for 5 minutes, or maybe 50. Eventually, the bell rings for afternoon lessons, and you rise, knees stiff and creaking, and shuffle out of the chapel toward the village path. Your free time is now over. You are once again a teacher, and you have a feeling the village children will ask, once again, whether St. Michael ever farted. The path down to the village winds, through dry grass and boulders shaped by time and prayer and probably goats. You follow it barefoot sure, sandals having finally given up on being footwear and deciding to become floor suggestions instead. The earth is warm under your soles, sun-baked and cracked, with little tufts of green pushing up here and there like rebellious monks. Down the hill, the village peeks through the haze, a tight cluster of thatched roof huts, donkeys tied to posts, and cooking smoke curling lazily into the air. The children have already spotted you. They always do, like tiny, shrieking birds in oversized tunics. They come barreling toward you with the energy of saints on sugar. "Abba," they shout, even though technically you're not an abbot. "Did St. George ride a lion? Can I have your hat? Do angels sleep?" You smile, as is tradition, and gently ward off the grabby hands reaching for your belt rope. You gather them near the big acacia tree in the center of the village. It provides the only real shade, and under it lies your classroom. A large flat stone for writing, a few sticks, a badly carved alphabet board, and roughly 18 children in various stages of attention. Teaching these kids is a daily lesson in humility and patience. The older ones are learning to copy GS letters with charcoal on smooth bark. The younger ones are mostly eating their charcoal and insisting that the letter GF looks like a cow falling over. You correct a boy's hand position as he writes. He nods solemnly, then immediately forgets and draws a stickman fighting a dragon. You tell him dragons aren't canon. He tells you neither is boredom. Historical fact time. In medieval Ethiopia, monks often served as local educators, especially in remote areas where formal schooling didn't exist. The curriculum was religious at its core, psalms, prayers, liturgical language, but also included reading, writing, and sometimes basic arithmetic. Teaching was considered an act of service, and patience was mandatory, though not always present. Today's fringe tidbit: some monks believed that children who sneezed during lessons were divinely blessed and destined for scholarship, which is why you currently have 3 kids fake sneezing in a row, then looking at you expectantly, like they're about to be handed golden scrolls. You bless them anyway, lightly tapping their heads and moving on. Now, here's where the academic types get tangled. Historians still argue whether monastic village teaching was a genuine outreach to uplift rural communities or a strategic tool to grow future monks and church loyalty. Either way, your knees hurt from crouching, and you've just watched a child try to feed his letterboard to a goat. You press on. After an hour of wrangling the alphabet into something that resembles education, you move into psalm rest. The children chant together, slightly off-key, but very enthusiastic, especially when they get to the psalm that involves lifting up eyes unto the hills. One child points to the actual hills and shouts, "My goat went that way." You nod gravely. So did the Lord. You end the lesson with storytelling a bribe, essentially, for their cooperation. Today you choose the tale of Saint Tekel, the monk who supposedly stood on one foot in prayer for 7 years until the other fell off. The kids gasp. One insists he could do that too, and immediately tries, then falls into a pile of chickens. You applaud his zeal. As the sun starts dipping, you pack up the few supplies and promise to return tomorrow. The children scatter, some to herding, others to fetch water. One just runs in circles because that's apparently his afternoon routine. You start the hike back uphill, robe clinging to your back with sweat and dust. A donkey brays at you as you pass. You bray back. It seems polite. Back at the monastery, the afternoon light is softer, now turning the stone walls honey gold and throwing long shadows across the courtyard. A few monks are gathering by the olive tree, talking in hushed tones about someone who accidentally lit the incense with a kitchen flame and now claims to have seen St. Mary in the smoke. You nod as you pass. Sounds entirely plausible, you say. Could have also been Brother Tisfay's sandals. You return briefly to your cell, just long enough to drink from your water jug, splash your face again, and stare at the wall for a solid 2 minutes without thinking anything at all. A single lizard skitters across the floor. You both pretend you didn't see each other. The bell rings. Time for afternoon chores. You head back outside and are quickly intercepted by Brother Gaetahan, who smells strongly of soap and mild trauma. "Don't go behind the latrines," he says, eyes wide. "Whatever's growing there, not fennel, not from this world." You nod. "I'll add it to the prayers." He nods back, visibly shaken, and limps toward the dormitory. Your chore today is minor. Water hauling. You'd grab the 2 large clay jugs from beside the chapel and head to the spring at the base of the hill. It's not a long walk, but it is steep, and carrying 20 pounds of sloshing water uphill is about as fun as it sounds. You make it in one trip, thanks to the dubious structural integrity of your spine. As you pour the jugs into the communal basin, you take a moment to breathe. The sun is lower now, and the air has cooled a bit. A breeze passes through the courtyard, rattling the leaves of the olive tree and causing a low, almost musical creaking from the chapel door. You sit for a moment on the step and close your eyes. You've chanted, copied scripture, eaten weaponized lentils, taught children with charcoal fingers, and lugged water up a hill, and the day is not even done yet. Dinner is coming. You can feel it in the air, or more accurately, in the faint scent of boiled something drifting from the kitchen. You're not hopeful, but you are hungry, which is a powerful enough motivator to turn even unseasoned porridge into an object of religious yearning. You file into the refectory with the rest of the monks, some limping from chores, some sleepwalking from afternoon prayers, and one, Brother Tesfaye, still twitching from his latest argument with the bees. No one asks. The tables are set, meaning someone has arranged wooden bowls and the occasional not quite clean spoon. You sit at your usual spot and fold your hands. The abbot enters last, nods silently, and gives a short blessing before everyone begins to eat in silence. Tonight's offering, a gruel made from teff grain and lentils, thick enough to stand a spoon and upright. Someone nearby tries it and quietly murmurs a half sigh, half prayer, that might mean, at least it's hot. You take your first bite. It tastes brown, not the flavor brown sugar or brown butter. No, this is just the taste of the color brown itself. Warm, gritty, and deeply committed to its blandness. You chew, you swallow, you continue. Your thoughts wander, as they often do during meals. You remember the time someone added dried figs to this dish and caused a minor theological debate. Was sweetness during a fast period a loophole or a lapse? Historians still argue whether monks were allowed to enjoy their meals, or whether food was simply fuel for the soulland, not the good kind of fuel, more like soggy firewood under a wet cloak kind of fuel. Across from you, Brother Zudu is counting lentils on his spoon like he's calculating divine significance in prime numbers. You look down and count yours. 16, a holy number. Debatable, but it's better than staring blankly at the wall, which you've memorized to the point of being able to redraw its cracks from memory. Now here's your historical fact for this portion of the evening. Teff, the grain that likely makes up the bulk of your dinner, is native to Ethiopia and has been cultivated there for over 5,000 years. It's rich in nutrients, gluten-free, and virtually indestructible both, as a plant and as a porridge. But for your fringe tidbit of the night, some monastic communities believed in intentional blandness as a spiritual weapon. The theory, if your food bored you into submission, you had more mental space for prayer. There was even a scribe named Beckel who allegedly refused all spices for 30 years, claiming the devil lived in You personally suspect the devil also lives in this gruel. You sip a bit of water, lukewarm, of course. Cold waters for celebrations and minor miracles. You try to imagine what a feast day would be like. Cheese, maybe honey, some roasted roots. Perhaps if the saints are feeling generosa, a bit of fermented goat milk. You dream small here. As the meal finishes, you place your spoon across your empty bowl and give thanks. Not because the meal was extraordinary, but because it's over. That's enough. Silently, you help clean up, stacking bowls and collecting spoons, making a mental note that one of the novices has been putting his spoon in upside down every night this week. You admire the consistency. Outside, the light is shifting again. Dusk in the highlands isn't loud. It's quiet and steady. The sky deepens into violet, then charcoal. The air cools quickly, and the wind picks up the smell of incense wafting from the chapel windows. You know what's next. Evening prayers. You shuffle into the chapel with the others, the stone floor now cold beneath your feet again. Candles flicker along the low altar. The abbot stands at the front, holding a small wooden cross, his voice soft but commanding. The chant begins. It's slower this time, more like a lullaby than a hymn. You sing with the others, voice low, trying to hit the notes without cracking. Across from you, Brother Dowett is going off the rails again, singing just sharp enough to open a portal to another realm. You glance over. He's deep in it, eyes closed, swaying slightly, like he's at an invisible concert. You respect the commitment, even if your eardrums don't. Tonight's hymn is one of the longer ones. You breathe in incense and let the sound carry you. You don't need to look at the text, you've sung this one 1,000 times. It's about light and mercy, and that part where you metaphorically throw your sins into a well and walk away humming. Now, a scholarly squabble worth noting. Some historians argue that Ethiopian chant traditions, called Zima, predate Western medieval music systems entirely. Others insist there was cross-influence via Coptic Egypt or Arabic styles. What's agreed upon is this. Ethiopian church music is unique, complex, and extremely difficult to hum while hauling water uphill. As the prayer ends, the abbot blesses the group with a sweeping sign of the cross. You bow your head. A few monks yawn discreetly. You're not judging, you're one of them. Outside, the moon has risen, a pale disk hanging over the hills, like it's watching you specifically. You inhale deeply. The herbs in the garden release their scent at night, and the courtyard smells like basil, ash, and something that might be onions, or might be Brother Tesfaye's robes again. You return to your cell. The stone walls cool and familiar. You light your small candle and sit on the floor, stretching your legs out in front of you. Your knees crack like firewood. You stare at the flame for a bit. You flicker. You wonder if the missing verse number is still bugging you. It is. Of course it is. You lie back on the straw mat, arms crossed over your chest like a statue of someone vaguely annoyed. You try not to think of lentils. Sleep won't come yet. There's still the midnight vigil, but you close your eyes for a moment anyway, letting your breathing slow, letting the quiet settle in your bones. And somewhere outside, a rooster crows again, in the dark. Of course it does. You don't even open your eyes when the bell tolls. It's that thin, metallic sound you've come to associate with either holy enlightenment or sleep deprivation-induced hallucination, like clockwork, except this clock runs on faith and the shaky upper arm strength of whichever poor novice is assigned bell duty. You groan internally and sit up. Everything aches. Not dramatically, not painfully, just enough to remind you that your body is roughly the consistency of old parchment in humility. You wrap your robe tighter around you and shuffle out into the night. The monastery is quiet, quieter than usual, if that's even possible. The sky is pitch black now, stars scattered like misplaced ink blots. The wind has teeth. You walk with your head down, the soles of your feet silent against the cold stone. The chapel door is already open, light spilling out in a soft, flickering glow. Candles line the altar again. The abbot stands at the front, unmoving, looking for all the world like someone who doesn't need sleep, or simply forgot what it is. You take your place among the others. Some monks kneel, some sit cross-legged. Brother Dawit is curled in an upright position that technically counts as prayer, but looks suspiciously like strategic napping. The vigil begins. Tonight's focus. Repentance, which, conveniently, pairs well with how deeply sorry you are for being awake. The chants are low and drawn out, each syllable stretched to the brink. You join in, your voice scratchy, your rhythm uneven. You close your eyes, and that's when it hits. The rhythm of the room, the droning chants, the scent of beeswax and breathets. Hypnotic. You float somewhere between awareness and dreaming. One moment you're thinking about psalm verses, the next you're picturing St. George sword fighting a goat. Then back again. It's a holy fugue state. Tonight's historical fact. Midnight vigils were considered one of the highest disciplines in monastic life. Staying awake to pray while the world slept was viewed as a direct spiritual offering. In Ethiopia, this practice often included hours of singing, chanting, kneeling, and reading scripture aloud, all in G. Some monks, particularly the overachieving ones, would remain standing the entire time, for 7 nights straight. Now, here's your delightful fringe tidbit. There's a legend about a monk who fell asleep during vigil and dreamed that an angel poked him in the forehead so hard it left a permanent dent. He became a local saint. His nickname, the Dented One. There's no record of whether this discouraged future dozing, and yes, historians still argue whether these vigils were purely spiritual exercises or cleverly disguised community control. Nothing builds obedience like 3 hours of incense-induced sleep deprivation followed by chores. You're halfway through the psalm when you realize you've been swaying slightly, not in a caught up in the spirit kind of way, more like one strong wind could take you out. You adjust your posture and try to focus. Across from you, Brother Macias appears to be reciting from memory while slowly rocking back and forth like a devout metronome. His lips move, but no sound comes out. Possibly his soul is praying directly, bypassing his vocal cords. The abbot reads aloud from the Book of Light, his voice steady and deep. The candlelight makes his face flicker between saintly and skeletal. He could be 200 years old. You're honestly not sure anymore. The prayers shift into intercessions, prayers for the sick, the travelers, the lost, the unfortunate souls who tried to farm during last year's locust storm. You mumble your own intercession for your left knee, which hasn't forgiven you for yesterday's uphill sprint after that one feral chicken. Then comes silence. Intentional, prolonged. You sit in it, breathe, think, or at least try to. Your mind drifts, like a feather in a cave. You wonder if it's possible to get sainted just for consistently showing up. You imagine Saint Hugh, patron of reliable attendance. Your statue would be sitting upright, eyes half closed, holding a bowl of lentils and a very confused rooster. You blink. The abbot stands. The vigil is over. You rise stiffly, legs grumbling, arms limp. The monks file out silently, some half asleep, some half holy. Outside, the sky is beginning to pale, just the faintest hint of light pushing back the dark. The birds are still quiet. The wind has settled into something gentler. You don't go back to your cell just yet. Instead, you walk toward the eastern edge of the monastery, the high wall overlooking the valley. You stand there, robes fluttering in the breeze, watching the shadows stretch and shrink like the breath of the earth. You spot a flicker of movement, a jackal, maybe slinking near the trees. Your breath fogs in front of you, and for a moment, everything feels still. Not silent, not emptied, still. The kind of stillness that monks have chased for centuries. Not because it answers anything, but because it makes the questions feel smaller. You finally return to your cell. It's cold again. You wrap yourself in your blanket, already knowing that morning prayers are less than an hour away. You lie back on your mat, eyes wide open, thinking of candlelight, ink, and dented foreheads. The rooster crows. You whisper,